Hello and welcome back to JVCTR. Now, as you can see behind me, we have a slightly more normal Fiesta, or at least this is the new normal because the Fiesta has gone hybrid. Now, this little badge here, which says EcoBoost Hybrid, is quite important because it is the only place on this car that differentiates it from all of the older EcoBoosts that are not hybrid. And I really like that because they don't need to shout about going green. Same story on the inside. On the inside, you've still got your carbon fibre, just like you get on the other ST lines and the Fiesta ST. You've got seats which are in ebony cloth, I think they call it, which are sort of part leather, part cloth. They look quite nice. Really, you would have absolutely no idea it's a hybrid. And the reason I'm so keen on this is because it really irks me with all these manufacturers being like, "Ooh, look at me, I'm going green." And it's like, yeah, sure, everyone's going green because it's kind of what we need to do. So I like the fact that Ford have kept the normality and just made it green and not shouted about it. Well, rather surprisingly for a hybrid system, all of the batteries and the new electric motor is sort of shoehorned in here, which from an owner's perspective means that you don't lose any cabin capacity or any practicality, and the car is just as practical as it ever was. The downside is there isn't much room under the bonnet, and that means that this hybrid system is a very mild hybrid system with relatively small batteries and a small-ish motor. But what Ford have done here to get those extra miles to gallon out of this is quite clever, but also kind of simple to explain. So we've got the 1 litre EcoBoost engine. They've binned off the old turbo. They've put a bigger turbo on it, which has obviously got a bigger turbine. That bigger turbo gives this, makes the petrol engine a little bit more efficient and actually gives you a bit more power. But the downside of adding a bigger turbo to any engine is you've then got a bigger fan that needs to spin up. That takes longer and then you get turbo lag. If you couple it with a small, mild hybrid system, you have a tiny little engine to shunt the car forwards whilst that turbo gets up to speed, and once the turbo is up to speed, the power of the petrol engine can then take over and continue propelling this thing forward. And actually that should work quite well with electric being nice and torquey and then this engine being nice and torquey. It sounds like quite a good coupling. So let's put the bonnet down, let's go find out, shall we? Right then, hybrid Fiesta, and initial impressions are, well, it doesn't feel like a hybrid Fiesta. For one, it can't run on solely electric power, which is generally what I can it's generally how you recognise a hybrid. Like Yaris's, for example, have been doing a non-plug-in hybrid for years, and that runs on solely electric power. But because this is such a mild hybrid system, it just feels like a normal car. You've got the 1 litre petrol engine, sounds like it always has done. Can't actually say I'm a fan of the sound of this engine. It sounds a little bit grumbly. I'm not surprised. It's an unbalanced 3-cylinder engine, but that said, it's not very loud, so it's kind of easy to ignore. Ooh! I've actually found something that makes it feel like a hybrid. There are a tiny collection of icons on the dashboard, The first of which is the picture of a battery with a little charging symbol in it, and that appears when you're either braking or not accelerating, and that is when you're charging your lithium-ion batteries from the kinetic energy of the car moving forwards and capturing as much of the energy that we can to make sure we're not throwing it away in heat and friction and that kind of stuff. So that's how the batteries keep charged. And the other one tells you to take your foot off the accelerator if you're driving too exuberantly, because obviously you don't want to waste all your battery. Now, as we've just sort of entered a town setting, you can probably hear it's very quiet in here, and that is because stop start is enabled. Now, stop start in this car, they've actually made it a hell of a lot better. Now, as you have that mild hybrid system, it means you've got a little bit more power on board, which means stop start can be a little bit more, I don't want to say intrusive, that's the wrong word, but it can turn itself off and start itself back up again quite a lot more because we've got more power. We don't have to worry about the battery being depleted. And I hate to say it, it's actually one of the first stop start systems that I've got on with. It's more keen to turn itself off. So in previous cars, instead of pressing the stop start off button, which is down there every time because that got a bit annoying, I actually just stopped and kept my foot on the clutch, and that was enough. But this car will still turn the engine off. If you've got your foot on the clutch in first gear, it will still turn off, and it can turn itself off at a speed of up to 15 miles an hour. Now, talking of start stop, I've just pulled over for some lunch and I was just playing with the menus really. And this is the first car I've been in that you can actually click through the menus and choose what you'd like start stop to do. So you've got high, medium or low. Mine has been set to high, and as I mentioned, it seems to be conking out when I'm still doing around 15 miles an hour. And although it's never felt dangerous, it just feels a bit odd to still be travelling at 15 miles an hour and have no engine. So I might try moving that to low and see how we get on. Now, with the intensity set a little bit lower, it seems to act a little bit more like traditional start-stop systems, which is okay, but I actually would prefer to save the additional fuel, I think. Love you right back. Now, the reason I think the Fiestas as a platform and as a car as a whole are so good is because it doesn't really matter which engine you pick. The chassis is so good on, say, a British B road that between doing all your boring stuff and your shopping and stuff, you can still have quite a bit of fun. So here we are on a relatively narrow British B road, and let's see if this car is the same, and I suspect that it will be. And considering we're pulling uphill, this engine is pretty strong. I mean, you can still heel and toe if that's your thing. The pedal spacing is exactly the same as a Fiesta ST. So yeah, I mean, it's in terms of like having some driving fun, should we say, this thing is pretty good. I mean, it's not a sports car, clearly, but if you want a day-to-day car that you can continue to have fun in, it's pokey. Considering it's a 1 litre hybrid, it's actually it's good. It's very good, I like it. Okay, so firstly, apologies for the continuity errors. As you can see, weather's different, I'm wearing different clothes, and that is because we're a few days on into my time with this Fiesta, and I've come across a couple of gripes that, you know, they're not going to spoil the car, but I thought they were worth mentioning to make this a fair and honest review. And all of these gripes are within the switchable drive modes, which are accessible by a button down here. Now, first up is Eco. I mean, it does what it says on the tin, really. It makes the throttle response really lazy. It feels horrible to drive, but because the throttle is lazy, you drive slower and you save fuel. Personally, probably wouldn't use it because I don't like the feeling of that lazy throttle. The other mode, which is not normal mode, is sport mode. And generally, I'm the kind of guy to be like, yeah, sport mode, yeah, always sport mode me, yeah. Not in this car, definitely not. It's okay to drive. I think the throttle response is very slightly sharper than it is in normal, but otherwise I can't really tell much of a difference. But my biggest issue is with the hybrid part of this car in sport mode. So, as you approach a corner, you take off the throttle and the car begins to slow at a rate like you'd expect, but only for a second. It feels like quite a long time, but about a second, I would say. And then the regen batteries kicks in, and the car just seems to sort of nosedive. It feels like someone else has put the brakes on, and quite heavily. And the problem with that is it makes slowing down for a corner really hard to judge. You'll end up slowing down more than you expect, then you end up accelerating into the corner, and then that's not a good place to be. So actually, my favourite driving mode would be normal in this car, purely because it's much easier to sort of second guess how quickly the car is going to slow down when you are approaching a corner, and that makes it a lot nicer to drive. So there we have it. That's my review on the new 1 litre hybrid in the Fiesta. All in all, I think it's awesome. It's really quite pokey. The only issue, I think, is it's perhaps been misbranded a little. So when people say hybrid, they think, ooh, good for the environment. This isn't really that good for the environment because it doesn't run on solely electric power or anything like that. It just goes a little bit quicker whilst maintaining kind of the same consumption as perhaps a slower car. So yeah, I kind of like that. And with that, I think we'll leave it there. So if you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of me, cars and that kind of stuff, then feel free to subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. There goes a sight from my soul.